Welcome to KeepItReal Studios, the only channel on YouTube that keeps it real. Whenever the UFC decides to go to the Madison Square Garden Arena, historic moments always seem to happen. And for UFC 309, they decided to repay a visit there. For the main card of UFC 309, we had undefeated prospects, fighters we haven't seen in a long time, and we had rematches for the ages. Diving into arguably the most important fights on the card, the co and main event. Ever since Michael Chandler made his debut in the UFC, all of his fights have been absolute wars and spectacular. Michael Chandler was a warrior, but he has been absent for 2 years now.
June 29th. Conor versus Chandler. 5 rounds, 170 pounds.
This was a fight that had fans buzzing all around the world. The notorious one, Conor McGregor, returning back into the octagon, facing Iron Michael Chandler. At UFC 303, these two were scheduled to face off, but for the first time ever in his career, Conor McGregor pulled out of his fight. This left the whole card destroyed, but luckily, the UFC had a savior. Eventually, Chandler got tired of waiting for the Irishman, and he decided to take advantage on Charles "Du Bronx" Oliveira. Charles Oliveira is the man with the most finishes in history and most fight bonuses. Michael Chandler has nothing but amazing matches every time he steps foot into the octagon. This was definitely a fight worthy of the Madison Square Garden Arena. When you're talking about who the greatest of all time is, a name that you always hear come up is
Jon Jones is the best ever. Ever.
Jon Jones is currently the king of the heavyweights, and he's arguably the greatest fighter of all time. And he wanted to go up against Stipe Miocic, arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time. This heavyweight clash was quite interesting. Both fighters were scheduled to fight earlier, but due to Jon Jones being injured, it had to be postponed. And the day finally arrived at UFC 309. Jon Jones defending his heavyweight championship of the world, going up against Stipe Miocic. And in the co-main event, you had Charles "Du Bronx" Oliveira going up against Iron Michael Chandler. This was definitely a card for the ages, and it was definitely a fight that you had to witness go down in history. With UFC 309 currently being a thing of the past, I thought it'd be interesting if we took a recap on what happened. From the early prelims to the main event card, it was full of twists and turns. We had fans turning against fighters, we had epic moments, we had close calls, and we just had fights to remember for ages. The rematch between Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler went quite differently than the last one. We saw a different side to Michael Chandler, a more patient side, but we also saw a different side to Oliveira, a more deadly side. Charles Oliveira definitely showed levels that night. He showed world-class jiu-jitsu, excellent striking, and amazing takedowns. Charles Oliveira definitely showed why he's feared when he's on your back. But Michael Chandler, with all the pressures and with all the efforts that Charles Oliveira had on him, he still couldn't submit him. So this made for an entertaining fight of the night. At the end of the day, this was still a Michael Chandler fight. So it was chock full with controversies. From Michael Chandler's fence grabs to punching Charles Oliveira in the back of the head multiple times, it was definitely a disaster. Despite all the controversies, mishaps, and even the 2-year layoff that Michael Chandler had that night, he still showed levels in the octagon, going 5 rounds with Charles Oliveira and also surviving with Charles Oliveira on his back. Michael Chandler definitely came prepared that night. And also the last round, Michael Chandler was still down 4 rounds to 0, and he still managed to almost get Charles Oliveira again in the octagon. But still, Charles Oliveira prevailed and managed to win that fight. But in classic Michael Chandler style, he definitely had to entertain the crowd by jumping not only once, but twice, and landing on his back to entertain all the fans in the Madison Square Garden Arena. Finally, the main event, the fight everyone's been waiting for. Well, at least what Dana White's been waiting for. A lot of controversy surrounded the main event because everybody wanted the interim champion, arguably also seen as the real heavyweight champion of the world, Tom Aspinall, to take on Jon Jones. However, that fight never came into fruition. Although Stipe Miocic was still ready and looked good throughout the whole fight week. Despite all the controversies and all the naysayers and all the doubters, the main event still absolutely delivered. Jon Jones definitely showed that he still has levels above the game and he's still hungry enough to stay in the heavyweight division. Yet another win came so easily for Jon Jones, and he just defied his legacy even more. And with Jon Jones telling the whole world that he's not retiring anytime soon. And this has led to the possible events of Tom Aspinall to fight Jon Jones.
Good heavyweight fight. Was very impressed by both guys. Awesome.
Your way. I think me and Jon next.
It makes sense. If Jon wants to stay heavyweight, it needs to be me and him next. I don't care. I don't care. That could be anywhere in the world. I'll show up.
This has led to so much possibilities, but it does seem that Jon Jones might be initiating for Alex Pereira fight.
I feel really great. That was a lot of fun. Stipe's by far the hardest puncher I've ever fought. Left hand and right hand. You know, I've been talking about his right hand the whole time, but he has a left hand too. Hey! Hey! It was awesome, man. We prayed together. We had our vibes high. We had our energy high. And Team Crystal, bro. Team Crystal.
Tell me down in the comments below how you feel about this. Would you rather see a Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira or Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall? That'll be it for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching, and don't forget to keep it real.